episode 7 of The Horror with Patrizia Dahlia Thompson. And on this episode, we are covering one of the kind of the big topics. It's one that, even with civilians, when you bring up that you like horror movies, people you wouldn't expect would surprise you about knowing this one. It's also one that a large section of horror influencers online decide that if you express any admiration for, you are a sick, horrible person who should have their hard drive looked at. So when it came to doing an episode about a film where, I might potentially get cancelled, of course you have to have the best of the best for that. And so we welcome back Louise Ward.
Hello, I'm so happy to be back. And yeah, a very I don't even know. When you asked me to come on to talk about this movie, I definitely was thinking to myself, like, what do I have to say? And then I kind of realized the more I thought about it that it kind of is a perfect movie for me to come on and talk about. So I'm really excited to dig into it.
Hell yeah, thank you very much. I mean, first, I think that your first episode that I did with you, it's interesting because like you and Nika Wilde have to be the people who I've referenced the most in each episode. But two filmmakers who I've other filmmakers I've had on had clips that were in your Fantastic Fest Dick Destruction montage, Jörg Buckerei and Fred Vogel. And also a lot of it, of course, Ryan Nicholson donated props to August Underground's Mortem and was involved with Fred. And it's funny because like it set up a lot of the kind of areas that the podcast, and then there's like Blair Witch Book of Shadows, which is
Hmm.
just new metal vibes. It's also a part of my personality and the tapestry of what this is about. Before we get into Serbian film, I invoked Ryan Nicholson and how people definitely have opinions about his movies. And you were starting to talk about how Gutterballs has one of maybe the most transphobic scenes in a film ever. But I felt like there was going to be a but to that. But I moved us on to another topic. So I'd like to give you the opportunity to kind of say what you were going to say that time.
Oh, well, it just is. Like that scene that Ryan has in Gutterballs where they uh, do the, I think the way he describes it as audio commentary is like, oh, I wanted to, do a scene where I turned a penis into a vagina or whatever. Like, it's like it comes from a place though of just like, the imagination of an effects artist. So like, it's very transphobic, and I think that probably the butt that I never really got to get into with that was when I was younger, looking at being very interested in underground film and film in general. I think that for me, just seeing a trans character in a movie in that way, where like she has like a group of female friends and stuff, like there's something that's actually quite funny
Kind of
about the depiction of
aspirational
Gutterballs.
if you're not
Well,
seeing yourself.
yeah, like it's funny, right? Because in terms of the pure representation of how it's presented in the movie, which this isn't the Gutterballs podcast, so I'll be brief. But it's like, this trans woman is with her group of friends at the bowling alley. She's really like picked on and like quite violent, or like brutally harassed by the group of guys who were also at the bowling alley that night. Then she ends up being one of the early victims of the slasher killer, and he basically castrates her in this really horrifying way and then rapes her with a bowling pin. But yeah, most characters in Gutterballs get raped with bowling pins. That's kind of the idea of the movie. But the kill is like fucking horrifying. The language used to describe her is quite horrifying. But I think that the things that are really interesting to me is that her group of female friends are really defensive of her. That I think that's like an interesting thing to see from like an underground 2000s
Mhm.
slasher, let alone just seeing a trans character in general, which I think obviously one of the big problems with it is the character exists there in order to do a special effects gag. And so there's some stuff that's bad about it, but to me, what I think is important about the space I found when I was working with Ryan and stuff like that was it was less a representational thing and more of a, oh, this is like a place I can go work where I won't be like some freak. Like I can go have fun and do a sick perverted horror movie with some other sick perverts, you know? And
Yeah.
I think that that was the thing that I connected to most was it felt like a place where it felt like more acceptable. And I felt the same way, like seeing gay characters in trauma movies and stuff like that, where it was like in these like sort of like very humorous, low budget movies that are very much so in bad taste, you'd end up with queer characters, usually who are, like the butt of some degree of joke, but it always felt less like more like kind of tongue-in-cheek satire to me than you would see in like the more mainstream depictions of queer characters in
Uh-huh.
horror movies. So I think that to me, like I just gravitated towards it more clearly. So when I say it's like one of the most transphobic scenes, like that's not to like let the scene like, I obviously not letting the scene off the hook. It is like a brutally transphobic like thing to put in a movie. However, I think that looking at it from just a representational lens diminishes the effect it had on me. I would obviously not put anyone else's opinions of it in question. I think that however some content like that makes you feel is entirely valid. But for me personally, when I was in high school watching a lot of this stuff with my boyfriends or whatever, or my group of female friends who I tricked into coming over to watch Sallow for a movie night or whatever. The whole point I think I'm getting at is that like, the realm of like sort of schlocky underground brutal exploitation cinema is often a place I felt connected to, and that's kind of where it changed my life to move into those directions and those spaces and take those jobs.
Yeah.
So I obviously have a very distinct relationship to it.
No, for real. But I think it's talking about you working in this kind of mode of underground we'll call it underground horror, gore porn, whatever. What is your what is your relationship to a Serbian film, and like were you already working on film sets when this movie was kind of in its infamy? Like what is
No, I was in
it to
high
it?
school. This came out in 2010.
Hmm.
And I remember hearing about it online because I was like quite chronically online and in film spaces and the IMDb message boards and all these sorts of different places to,
Thing.
see underground film. And all the horror blogs were talking about Serbian film, and I was probably like on 4chan and stuff too, seeing people posting about this fucked up movie that has the horrible infant scene. And because I was a terrible, awful edgelord in high school, I remember me and some friends went out to another movie that was like a 35 millimeter print of something that was being hosted by two of my best friends in Calgary who would do this monthly film series called Burning Moon. That was obviously named for the Olaf Hindenburg film.
I still need to see
Uh,
that.
oh, it's a great one. But they did some screen. I think it was like either I Spit on Your Grave or like Dr. Butcher MD, like some like like kind of cult horror film. And then we came back to my bedroom in my basement, and had just torrented Serbian film because it just hit torrenting websites. And I remember I said, "You guys got to see this shit," and I cut straight to the most notorious scene in this movie and made everyone sit there and watch it. And it everyone was like kind of horrified, obviously. And I thought it was like really funny at first, the idea of showing it, but I hadn't watched the movie yet. So the second that I kind of got to that point, it also made me feel really bad, and I immediately regretted being an edgelord. And I think that was actually like I think it was because of this movie that I kind of had a slight personality shift. That might have been like the moment I got empathy for like horror movies, like where I was like, oh, like this is yucky actually. I don't like this. So I can kind of probably point towards Serbian film as like maybe a limit that one of the first times I ever found a limit. The thing is though, I think like in watching that specific scene, it was like also part of like from the filmmaker brain of like thinking like, oh yeah, here's how they did it. Oh my God, the puppet looks so fake, blah 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 blah, right?
Yeah.
So it's like there's like levels to it for sure. So that would be like my history of having seen it would have been like when it first hit torrenting websites, uncut. I did buy the original release Blu-ray that came out, but I don't think I ever watched it because it was a cut version. So yeah, like I've seen this film like twice. I saw this film twice when I was younger, but it was one of those ones where like I would always have people borrow the Blu-ray from me because it did have that like sort of cult following
Yeah.
in online of like most fucked up movie ever. So people were kind of getting like the best version of it because the cut version had like I think 6 minutes cut out of it or something. Like definitely that really
Yeah.
notorious scene was cut out of it. So it basically meant that every like people would like borrow the movie from me and be like, ah, that was nothing. Like what the why is this so controversial? But yeah, I do think it's I think that the thing that shocked me the most when Serbian film like when I first saw a Serbian film is the fact that this movie is really well produced.
Uh,
Because when I was reading about the content ahead of time, I think I was imagining it more in that like life and death of a porno gang sort of like style or
I
like
haven't seen
August
that one yet.
Underground or something. Yeah, like just something that feels like a lot dirtier and on video and whatever.
Yeah.
And then you get this movie and it's like shot on like it's like early red, so it looks like so freaking like contrasty and has that really like cool like early red digital cinema sheen on it. So it's
Yeah.
like I don't know, it's just like kind of it's kind of like shocking that it's like a real movie that has this and like to define real movie like something that has like real production values behind it, works to such a crazy extent. Like it's just very impressive to me that this movie exists, and I think it's the fact that it's shot quite well that it's kind of persisted and it's persisted as much as it has because it does kind of make the content feel a lot crazier. Like the fact that it's shot nicely and tells a story and all of this stuff. It's not just like, some sort of like omnibus film of depravities or whatever. It's not Faces of Death or something. It's very watchable.
To give like my history of it, I heard about it, and then in 2010, I knew the organizer. I know the organizer of the only horror fest here in Dublin, and the kind of infamy of this film was kind of building up, and like I think a huge part of it is like what you nailed there was the fact that it looks really good, and like. I know when you say real movie, you're not making some kind of judgment of quality because, like, I said this when talking to Fred. Like, shout out Hazel, loyal listener, member of my polycule. We were talking in the group chat one night and she was talking about a Serbian film. I was like, yeah, a Serbian film is disturbing, but unlike August Underground's Mortem, which feels like a video kind of like dredged up from hell, like just a videotape dredged up from hell, and is so much more like these people are literally just shooting whatever in between killings. A Serbian film doesn't have that level of grot and doesn't have like real self-harm and real puke, and that's what moves a Serbian film into a different level of sicko. But I hadn't seen it for a few years when I kind of said that, and it's like, yeah, there might be films that are more disturbing, but this is pretty fucking bad. Like, I mean, it also like I'm gonna say it, like it kind of fucking rips. Like it really, there are moments like where he's like where Mila and like I'm not gonna go through like a blow by blow of the plot, pardon any pun, because like there's a lot of podcasts that have done that, and you can read the Wikipedia or you can listen to Gore Things episode if you kind of want that kind of thing. But obviously there'll be key moments that we talk about. But like when Milos is like fucking the guys in the head, like the one-eyed kind of henchman, and he's like killing him by driving his cock into his eye socket, and like his face is like straining. I'm like, this fucking rocks. Like this is amazing. It's so it's disturbing, and I think like the moments where it's disturbing are kind of like more the anticipatory moments, like when the director first brings up the TV and is going to show Milos the newborn porn scene, the music and his reactions are disturbing because the baby is like fake as fuck. And August Underground's Mortem has like a like more like August Underground Mortem definitely has more actual shots of Maggot fucking that child in the bathtub than this movie does of the baby. A sentence I can't believe I'm saying. But like in 2010 when it came out, just to go back, it was like it was due to screen at Fright Fest. Fright Fest in London generally works on like a film club license. Like when you buy a ticket, you become a member of the film club for that screening. So they are allowed to show stuff without BBFC cert because obviously they're movies that haven't paid for a BBFC cert yet because maybe
Hmm.
they don't have distributors. And the council generally let them just do that. But Westminster Council, because of this movie's infamy, said no, it's going to have to be certified, and they were saying you got to cut 6 minutes if you want to show the movie. And then like here it was, I remember asking like the going like, oh, is it going to screen at the festival? And I think it came down to a moment where like the owner of the cinema that the festival takes place in was like given a copy, and the ultimate choice landed with him because there was like a fear if like the Red Top Press kind of got like Irish Film Institute showing child porn shocker kind of thing, like that could be really bad image wise. So I think that was ultimately what made it not happen. And then I didn't see it for like 11 years after that, where like a friend of my ex-fiance, we were in her place and she was like, I'm getting rid of these DVDs, like realistically not going to get any money for them. Do you want some? And she like showed me her horror collection, then was like, do you like the messed up stuff? Because like I have these, and there was like some the films from that label, Brain Dead, if you remember them, and then like a Serbian film, like the UK cut that was cut by 6 minutes, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch it, but it's like it felt dirty even having that in my house, and I was like, I'm gonna watch it once to know, and then I'm gonna get rid of the copy, and like I watched it when my ex was out of the house, and I was like, there's something effective about it, but like when he rams his cock into that guy's eye was the moment where I was like, it's kind of like the earlier moments that were more disturbing, it kind of loses it in favor of this tone that's kind of more like trauma. And I love trauma, but I was like, that's a different thing to what the rest was doing.
Uh-huh.
I've now watched the movie 3 times. And I think the biggest change for me is like one, it is really beautifully made, but it doesn't seem as smart or as quite I like now, like full disclosure, I watched that on fedupmovies.com. So maybe the transfer wasn't the best there. And also I feel like some of the subtitles may not have been the most accurate. But I feel like it does look beautiful. It does look very 2010 red, but I take it you kind of see that as a positive, and it does look gorgeous. But also, like for me, the tone, my how I view the tone has changed. Where it's like, yeah, that moment where he rams the cock into the guy's eye is like insane, but also like the rest of the movie kind of has that tone for a lot of it too. Like the
Yeah.
direct. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Oh yeah, I said yeah, no, I mean it's a comedy. I think the movie's a comedy.
Dare I say it, like this is a stretch, but I do think it has two things in common with Castration movie. One one is cast you have talked about castrate even on the last episode, you talked about Castration movie as a kind of parody of the idea of a trans film in terms of the movie about a trans sex worker where she dies at the end. And the director has as much admitted that by calling it a Serbian film, and the fucking opening title bit rules, but by calling it a Serbian film, he was kind of making a parody of the kind of films that were being made in Serbia to appeal to like European or international kind of art funding bodies. An essay I read used this term self-balkanization to describe this idea of like courting the stereotypes of Serbia in order to get funding from kind of a Western or a more international gaze. I think it also is a like Castration movie is about a character that gets fucked a lot metaphorically and literally.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I think that very similar sentiments. I actually did have the chance this past fall to meet Alexander Radivojevic, who wrote Serbian Film. Super nice guy, true edgelord. He dresses like one of the Columbine shooters in his like
Amazing.
late 40s, early 50s or whatever. He's like a very sweet boy. total edgelord. And yeah, no, like talking with him, like I think that there is certain shades of the same level of like kind of sticking it to like what you're expected to do as a certain type of filmmaker. And I think the thing that I learned having met Alexander is with both Serbian Film and his new movie Karmadonna, which I highly recommend checking out if you're into, these types of movies.
Yeah, first
It
time
should be
you were
coming
on,
out.
you told me about it. I haven't got around to seeing it yet, but I'm hopefully soon.
Yeah, well, I think it's coming out later this year, so it's not out yet. But what I'll say is the sort of fun that comes from his work that he writes is like he doesn't care about subtlety. Like he wants to get all these themes like packaged in the most like blunt and stupid way possible because I think he has like basically no respect for his audiences. Like like he really feels like a certain level of like I don't put words in his mouth or anything, but my impression of him and the way he writes is that the way he views the audience is like I'm gonna spoon feed you these themes and really try to shock you and wake you up, and he has like a very like sort of like antisocial sort of like perspective on the modern world of just like he hates corruption, he hates he just hates the way people are so full of themselves or something. Like he has like a very anti-ego sort of sentiment, as I said, like very school shooter vibes. So Alex, I think that with his writing, it's very much so designed around kind of hitting the audience over the head in a very blunt way, and I think Alex finds it quite funny. Um, and I think that the thing is like that should unlock like Serbian Film. It's funny people call it such a disturbing movie and stuff, but it is like kind of like a cartoon world of like depravity, right? Like I think it's more in line with like reading 120 Days of Sodom or like the like Marquis de Sade type writing where it's like you're kind of satirically, going over the top with these descriptions of sex and violence commingling as like a sort of like artistic statement on, like contemporary life and if these guys feel that like these guys felt that like Serbian cinema was like so repressive and doing like a disservice to like what it actually feels like to be Serbian, and then they, as a joke, be like, well, this is how we think it feels to live in Serbia, and it's like, yeah, no, your whole family's going to be raped and murdered, and you're going to kill yourself, like it's like, I think that like that in itself is like so obviously a joke. And the thing is, it doesn't make it like any more of like a pleasant movie to watch. I mean, like full disclosure, I didn't feel a need to rewatch this film like last night before watching it. Like it is kind of seared into my brain from the first two times I saw it. But like, yeah, I would say like it perfectly accomplishes what it sets out to do with its goals. There's some really crazy kills. Anytime I see a clip from Serbian Film like shared by someone who's trying to like be like, look how crazy this movie is or whatever, I'm always like quite impressed with like this like low budget film from Serbia that like looks and feels like this good, Like I think it's kind of sick. I don't particularly know like I guess what is most fascinating to me is just like how it's kind of gotten this reputation for being one of the most disturbing
Yeah,
movies ever made.
because
Um,
it's broken containment.
yeah,
Like
I
I
guess
work
so, yeah.
I work in libraries and like I schedule these screenings of like old movies that mostly had a senior kind of audience coming to them. And like my manager, who was a lovely guy, but was like, normal. He was like joking, like, ah, yeah, we were joking about movies that you could show. Because one time I had a David Lynch tribute that wasn't part of that series because he was like, there's a 90-year-old woman who comes to these, Patricia. Like, she's gonna have a heart attack if you show her Razorhead. But like he was like joking like we should show a Serbian film as like it's become a punchline as like an inappropriate movie to show. Do you know what I mean? Like and it has an
Yeah.
infamy. And what do you think that is? Do you think it's because of the production values? Because I have a few theories.
I think it's just because if you so like speaking when I was younger and I was first getting into extreme movies, I remember the way I discovered a lot of stuff was like on the IMDb message boards. I would look at like a disturbing movie, go into a thread that was like, "Can you recommend me more movies like this one?" And then I would just like read the descriptions. And I remember like, like the first time reading like the plot description for like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. The movie sounded or Happiness by Todd Solondz. It's like you read the plot description and you're like, this must be the most fucked up and depraved movie ever made. Like I can't even
Yeah.
imagine someone filming this. I can't imagine watching it. And you watch it and the tone's like totally different than you imagined, Like it's still depraved, it's still fucked up, but like you're now seeing actors and all this stuff doing it, and there's so many things that are implied and off screen and this and this and this, right? So your imagination is going to go so much farther with like filling in the gaps of like kind of almost like worst case scenario of what the movie could look like. So I think with Serbian film there's so many scenes in it, like there's such a density of moments like that where if you were just described like, oh, there's this scene where the climax is like he accidentally like fucks his son or whatever, it's
The
like
sound
that
effects
sounds.
during that scene are just so vile. Like that's what's worse
Yeah,
than the
like
imagery.
that's the thing. It's like describing it is so brutal that it's impossible. Like any like person is gonna have some reaction like, wow, I can't believe that's in a movie. That's fucked up. And I think that the thing with Serbian film is then if you are like because of like the slickness of the production and all this stuff, like it makes it feel like a little dangerous in a way that I think allows like it I don't know, like there's enough production value that it makes it feel like a bit of a dangerous movie to put on because it's like, oh, this has like enough production value that like when this scene that was described to me that sounds horrifying shows up, they actually were able to like film this like skull fucking scene or whatever, right? And I think the distinction between this and like the August Undergrounds or something like that is because this is in like, like more crystal clear HD. What it loses realism because obviously it feels more, you feel a great degree closer to real life when you watch something that has that more home video or lower budget aesthetic. But what it makes up for in is just like I guess there's something about the distanciation, like the distance you feel when you watch something like August Underground, where like it feels like it kind of turn like almost checks off more of like a true crime part of your brain or something like that, where you can understand how it relates to the real world and the way in which the real world has like horrible crime like that in it. Whereas because Serbian film is such a cartoon world, I think it's like almost more disturbing, where it's like you're seeing these things that are so dreamlike in their specificity and extremity that
Mm.
it's like it's actually like kind of like more upsetting than something that feels more real because it's like it's kind of like that worst part of your imagination. It's going to actually sync up closer with it than
Yeah.
like a movie like Henry Portrait of the Serial Killer or something that has like a more grimy, gritty aesthetic.
I think that's definitely you've kind of nailed what for me is like the key to the tone and where my kind of like understanding of the tone has changed is that like from the moment when it begins and it's got like the score is brilliant as well. But like when it begins and it's got this like kind of like pounding kind of like my friend pen electronic music friends would disagree with me. This kind of like drum and bass playing as like his son's watching this like porno and then he's like taking the girl out into the alley to like there's this then later on he's watching another porn one of his old porn films and like he's fucking this girl and doggy and then like he puts on like safety goggles because he's like fucking her in this like in like in a garage and it's like it's it's that level of kind of like absurdity like I think
Hmm.
the other thing that I think potentially like made it breach containment was its infamy in terms of being banned, but like this was 2010, so we were just kind of reaching the point where like downloading movies was becoming a reality that you could do easily with the technology. Do you think like that played a factor in it?
Yeah, I think that and also one thing that just popped into my head is the fact that it's also a movie about snuff films.
Yeah,
Um, so it feels like it's not trying to recreate the snuff film aesthetic in the way that like August Underground or like a lot of these other like low budget movies are
yeah,
trying to,
Guinea
or like
Pig and
mixtape collections that show real death and stuff. Instead, you have a movie that's like about the sort of like this horrifying underground ring of pornographers making snuff films and these like horrible rape movies and child rape and all this stuff. And I think it is like one of those things where I think that it's hitting at a time in 2010, right when the internet is starting to move into this like more mainstream zeitgeist towards like ideas of like child sex trafficking rings and all these things that like we're obviously really now in the biggest cultural fallout of with like the Epstein releases and
yeah.
stuff like that.
This movie
So
hits
like
different.
well, yeah. Well, I know. I think it kind of like what I'll say is I think that that stuff was all like still very relevant. I mean, like the thing is like I'm such like a I'm a sicko who loves all my history and stuff like that. So I was very much into the true crime stuff or that like around the Franklin cover up and like other other historical child abuse scandals in the U.S. So like.
Yeah.
I think that stuff's always been sitting there under the surface, and like I grew up at a time when like the Satanic Panic stuff
Yeah,
had
totally.
like quite a like Satanic Panic wasn't happening. I wasn't growing up during that period. I was growing up with like when there was the fallout of us like looking back on a movie like Blair Witch 2 and like all those Joe Berlinger documentaries and stuff like that, and you're like, fuck, like God, what a crazy time, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it was like, God, I can't believe that happened. Like, so there was like an awareness of it where all of a sudden the internet, moved into like more spaces where like started to see, especially once QAnon started up in the mid 2010s. I think that that actually co-aligns with when Serbian Film became like every YouTuber's like favorite bottom of the iceberg disturbing movie chart thing because of the fact that it's a movie that's about all of these things that are kind of like becoming like the common cultural boogeyman of like child abuse rings and snuff
Yeah.
films and all this sort of stuff. It's like this doesn't really have Satanism in it, but it's like like the degree of violence and
But
stuff I think speaks to those that similar imagery.
but at that time, I think at that time on the internet, the Satanism was invoked kind of later with QAnon and stuff, which is basically
Hmm.
Satanic Panic repackaged. I don't know if you've seen that great documentary Satan Wants You about Michelle Remembers, but
Hmm. Yeah.
have you seen it?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Some of
Oh,
my
it's
friends worked
really
on it out here in Vancouver.
Oh, cool. It's really great, but you have the FBI kind of guy in that saying like when this started up, he was like, "Oh shit, this stuff again." But it's also like Red Rooms, which of course the movie Red Rooms explores brilliantly. That was kind of like the kind of things that we were talking about. Red Rooms, I mean, like the kind of like famed kind of like mythical internet gore videos like Daisy's Destruction and stuff like that. And that kind of stuff, I think would it be fair to say was kind of what was like percolating in terms of the discourse at that time.
Well, I think especially among like the people who would be, I guess, within the demographic to watch a disturbing movie like this one would be like maybe hearing about like, on forums and stuff and IRC chats and whatever about these like, oh, this snuff film exists and blah 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 blah. Oh, have you heard of this thing or that thing being real? And then you have this movie, Serbian Film, come out that is almost like riffing on the idea of like, oh yeah, in Eastern Europe, this is what's happening. So like I think it fits well into the zeitgeist, at least in North America. Wait, I guess is it just in English speaking countries, do you think that this film has its sort of like that sort of cultural footprint, or do you think that it extends further? I would just be really curious if
Yeah,
like yeah.
I'd be curious because I know it was banned for a while in Brazil. I know that like it was kind of either banned or like heavily censored in Korea. But I think that by virtue of being an English speaker and by virtue of being kind of, following the kind of horror people that I do, my reaction that I'm going to see is going to mostly be English speaking countries.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that I remember being at, the same horror festival in like 2021. and talking with people about this movie. And sorry, there was a guy at the festival, and we were talking about it, and he was like, "Oh, the thing was, they just wanted to make a movie where they just made the most fucked up, put the most fucked up stuff in it because they wanted people to talk about it." And I was like, well, 11 years later and we're still talking about it, like mission accomplished. If that's
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
goal of the if that's the goal of the movie, which I think it's perfectly fine for the goal to be, then it achieved that. Like you can't deny that. But I think what's
Yeah.
interesting in terms of the discourse around it now is that you have the people who are like, you should have your hard drive, sir. Like, it's so weird seeing horror influencers. And like, I joked at the beginning about, you're the one you have to get on when you're going to cancel yourself. But also, like, you have a degree in semiotics. Like, I think you have such smart takes on this kind of stuff. That I don't, want to go too much rolling in the mud of talking shit about influencers. But I find it funny seeing people who like are into horror films and extreme horror and stuff that like people are always going to brand you a sicko for liking, being like, oh no, but these people who like this one movie, they're the real sickos and they're different than me. But
Yeah.
you have those people doing that, but then you have the people who are like, oh, but you don't get it was actually a political statement. And I think it can be both. Like there is definitely those thoughts going into it in terms of the message that they're trying to talk about, like this idea of like
Yeah.
you're raped from birth, you're raped through life. Um, but it's also an edgelordy movie. Like it can be both of those things.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Serbian film is like I can't like I would be a little hesitant like it would really be a personality to personality basis. If someone was like, "This is my favorite movie," if they were like, turbo edgelord guy who's just like saying it for a bit or something, like I could understand that. I mean, the thing about Serbian film is it's really stupid, right? Like it's really
Yeah.
dumb. It's really simple in its politics. And I think a lot of that is to translate, like make it very also like so it has legs, travel across the world and stick in the public consciousness to this extent where most people have heard of it in film spaces at the very least. What I will say is really interesting is like Alexander, um, like this fucked his career, right?
Yeah, it fucked everyone's
he was
career.
he was talking to me about the fact that like that Carmadonna movie that he finally made, like 16 years after making this movie was like written first. You want to do that one first? Serbian Film did not did not in any way help these guys. Like it is a self-destructive, like almost like prank to pull. And I think that the thing I'll say is I think there is a sincerity between Sturden and Alexander's filmmaking in terms of they have themes and ideas that they want to express. They're direct targets. This is not a movie that's just about making the most disturbing movie possible. It is them
No,
trying
no.
to make a political satire. And I think that like they succeed in a very extreme way, but I think they almost go so far with what they are depicting and what they're doing in it, where the joke they almost like kind of go too far on the joke side of it. And I think it actually overshadowed what they're working with thematically. And like the thing is like it is like almost like a fairy tale, that's like trying to say like this is what it feels like to live in my country in this current time and whatever. And I think it's like very specific to them in terms of how they approach it and what their targets are.
Uh-huh.
And obviously it's very critical of the Serbian film industry. I think that that is like the number one target that they are getting at in terms of like what they're making fun of like that's what the movie's really about. But I think that like what really is unfortunate is the movie pushes so far with its content that it becomes almost too stupid and drowns out these otherwise interesting, like sort of satirical sensibilities. And like seeing Alexander's new movie, it's interesting where it actually holds back more on the blood, violence, and gore and pushes harder into being directly political and is very much so didactic in terms of like saying, like I don't like influencers and all of this stuff. And so I think it's really funny that you have to wrap it back to what you asked me about influencers, I think it is hilarious that this movie, which I think has this sort of like almost like scolding mentality of like, oh well, no one should watch or like this movie among like as you pointed out, like horror people like kind of like help build into its myth status by saying like no one should watch this. I think it is very funny that Alexander's like follow-up movie is all about how all influencers are like dumb morons who should be like turned into a violent paste, you know. So I think I think that I'd be curious to ask him if any of the horror influencers factored into him writing saying that he clearly hates hates people who post too much as his next movie does. But yeah, so I guess that to me, like I could care less if people want to like, you know, be like scolding about like, oh, you shouldn't watch Serbian film. I mean, like the thing is, it's not like some classic horror movie that people need to watch. It's a shock. It's the very definition of a shock film that you know exists to be edgy and get people thinking about, you know, like, you know, why do we have to, you know, fuck so many kids in this movie and what are you trying to say? Like I think you know, it's not a nice sit. It's a pretty rough movie to watch.
Yeah, I mean,
Terrible date movie. Terrible date movie.
are you saying that from experience?
No, God, no. I would never like terrible date movie. I'm aware it's a terrible date movie. I would not. I brought it up to my girlfriend last night, being like, "Oh fuck, I've got to do this podcast," and I, you know, didn't feel like rewatching the movie. She's like, "Oh, what movie? We can throw it on." And I was like, "Oh boy," and she was like, "Oh, I saw it several years ago," and I was like, "Yeah, but I have no. I don't think either of us have an interest in rewatching that one." So there you go.
Wow. I'm quite happy with myself that I rewatched it and you didn't. When I first had you on, I was like, you're more of a sicko girl than I. I'm like, okay, work. I mean, what do you think of like the performances in the movie? Because I think the actor who plays Milos, who's also called Serdan, I'm sorry if I butcher any Serbian pronunciation, any Serbs listening, but I think his performance is great, and I think the director is like he's diving so much into the river of ham, and it's like, but it's perfectly suited to the tone of the movie that it's kind of brilliant. Like when he's like shouting like newborn porn,
Porn!
newborn.
Porn! Newborn!
It kind of rules, but also
Yeah.
maybe it's indicative of what you were saying about the kind of problem with the tone of the movie of going too far and kind of losing stuff.
Well, the thing is like I think that that's really intentional. Like with that sequence specifically, like that his line delivery of that has stuck with me for fi 15 fucking years, and it's because it is like hot. It's camp. It's really extreme. It's really stupid. I can't believe you can get actors in a room to say these
Yeah.
lines. Like I can't like it's just. It's so impressive to me on like a filmmaking perspective that you could write this script and be like, yeah, we're gonna go take this seriously and make this. But like I think w when it comes to those performances, it is interesting because there is a balance between like I think that a lot of the people in the pornography side are these like very like archetypal stock like campy characters like the child psychologist woman or whatever
The
and
nurse,
stuff like
yeah.
that. Yeah, the nurse. And
His
like
best his
yeah.
friend from porn who like wears like fetish outfits to go meet him for like a drink during the day, like and is constantly wanting his dick, like
Well, I've got to say, like the film's not specifically like structured very well. So much of it revolves around like having this unreliable sort of narrator who's like drugged and unsure of where he is half the time, and um, I think it's you know I think that the movie's a little. I'm gonna be honest, like I remember this movie being a bit of a chore to watch. Um, I don't think it's a particularly great film. I don't even think it's like that worth watching as a like crazy sick fucked up edgelordy movie. And I think a lot of that just comes down to me finding it to be like tonally this sort of like you know this sort of like like it's a satire that's like too over the top. and its targets are almost like too broad, you know?
Mm.
Like making a movie that's like kind of trying to be critical of like the sort like I don't know. I think that for me, not having a connection to like Serbia, especially, and not being having like a close enough awareness of every sort of like corrupt target they're trying to point out. Like I'm sure that there's like so many details in this movie that go over my head where I bet every character lines up to some specific like person or politician or whatever in like like the bourgeois of Serbia or whatever. But like I do think for me a lot of that stuff like definitely goes over my head. I really do recommend checking out Carmadonna, which is like
Oh, I can't
Alex's far
wait.
follow-up movie. It has the same sort of like plot messiness, but its targets are very clear, very funny. It's like a movie about how much he hates social media influencers, and it's a blast because of that. It does not have no one on earth would call it the most disturbing movie ever made. So I think from that metric, it's a good step in the right direction in terms of not being like going for edginess. I kind of wish it went harder actually, but that's fine.
Right. Okay.
Um,
I was about to ask you
but
that.
yeah, I definitely wish it went a little harder, but I bet, you know, as a filmmaker, I think after going as hard as they did in Serbian film, I could see thinking, you know what, maybe I don't need to like show this act of violence or whatever on camera. But yeah, I think that to me, like, I don't want to like scold people in terms of saying like you shouldn't watch this movie, it's too fucked up, like you're that's disgusting or whatever. It's more just like I think that there's like, you know, I would rather recommend someone saying that they might not hear about or see otherwise as like a weird, like fucked up, sick movie, you know? Like if you want to watch a great movie about a father who's dealing with like the sort of like suffocation of like modern existence and results in pedophilia and family obliteration, go watch Cutting Moments or
I
something, you
still need
know?
to
It's
watch
like,
it.
uh-huh. We love Douglas Buck's work. He's an incredible filmmaker, and that movie is a really heavy, awful watch. But I think it says a lot more. I think it's a lot more artful. I do also think that the red cinematography, as much as it does like have a real movie-ish aesthetic, I think it really dates the look of Serbian
Yeah.
film in a way that's like really, really noticeable and kind of is like a like I don't know. I have like a nostalgia for that look because like that's kind of like what was coming out when I first started making movies. So that very digital look definitely has like a place for me. But I think it feels I don't know somewhat weird to look at. And if you want a movie about crazy snuff film stuff, go watch like Last House on Dead End Street.
I need to
If
rewatch
you
that. I haven't seen it since I was like
um,
18.
yeah,
But
it's a little slow, but I think it's you know quite an artful sort of approach to similar material, and I do think if you know if you really want to see something that's like in the same vein as Serbian film and you don't want to you know maybe you've already seen Serbian film, I do recommend Life and Death of a Porno Gang. It's a fucking weird gross movie that's like kind of more in line with like the low budget underground stuff that I think we gravitate towards. It definitely, you know, it's like a weird, gross, you know, like pornographers having to make snuff films thing, but like done in like that low budget, we're gonna spend most of the movie running around the woods sort of deal that
yeah,
I have like a little bit more empathy for. And you know, also a Serbian horror film from the same period. I remember those films being really. I do remember that film and Serbian film being compared
Yeah,
uh
that's how I've heard of
a
it as
lot.
the other
Yeah.
film.
And it's also like a huge mess, but it's like, it's like the one that I think people have forgotten about from
Mm.
like those late 2000s Serbian horror movies, and I would recommend people check it out. It's not good, but like, most movies aren't good in this space that we're talking about. So I mean, like, if you want to watch something interesting, go do it. Yeah, so I mean, those are all definitely recommendations from me. If I assume anyone listening to this probably has at least some interest in a movie like Serbian film, so there's definitely some, if this is the only disturbing movie you've heard
No,
of, or like you've heard of is the most disturbing movie, trust me, there's more out there, and there's stuff that is far more interesting to check out. This is definitely not the limit by any means.
well, the aforementioned kind of Hazel from who I mentioned earlier, she's a prime example of a type of person who has said that they're more interested in hearing me talk about these kind of films than they are in actually watching them themselves. It's
Yeah.
funny because your great podcast you do with Aoife Transpanic, there's a few things in this that kind of like come up a lot in movies that you've covered, which is like the porno to snuff pipeline kind of film. That's like a trope that we see a lot. But also, I think like the pair of you have kind of like you strike a good balance between like suggesting the different readings from you can take from a film, but also going, but yeah, also they just wanted to kill like do some sick kills with like homeless people and like minorities basically in some of these.
Yeah.
But I think like the film is kind of about like for me, I think what I kind of read into it is like this kind of like, and the thing is that where and this movie did fuck people's careers. Like the director, he has not done another movie since. He did part of ABC's of Debt, and like every once in a while has kind of popped up
Mhm.
with announcing a new project, but he hasn't directed another feature. What? Sorry, my point being, like, there is kind of question marks of where he raised Serdan raised the money to make this movie. There's definitely been people who've kind of criticized him as like a rich boy who was educated outside of Serbia and then came back. Like, it was privately funded. That's probably he hasn't been able to do that again. That does add an interesting element to this kind of like message or, not, or kind of interest that I'm getting from the film. But I do think like it's about the kind of malaise of late stage capitalism, maybe kind of white boy malaise because it's, maybe a rich kid doing it. But it's kind of about like the reduction, like in your I referenced in an article I wrote, I hope you didn't mind, your review of American Guinea Pig, and you talked about, getting catharsis from seeing these films where like the human form is kind of like destroyed and like reduced to meat. I think I see a Serbian film as kind of being about this idea of like reduction of people to objects, but also like reduction of you to something that can provide value to that can provide capital. And it's like his friend Milas's friend says you turn him into a dick on a head or like a dick on a stick or something, and then when
Mhm.
he is like kind of being led up to having sex with the underage girl who's dressed like Alice in Wonderland, he goes to like puts the knife to his dick and like threatens to kind of slice it off, and it's like his only power in that moment is to like put his body against the gears, as they would say, and like threaten to destroy the thing that is his only source of value. I mean, what would you kind of think to that? Or do you kind of think like the film is a bit more dumb than kind of making any of those kind of points?
No, I actually, it's great you brought up Surgeon's ABC's of Death segment, because I don't know if you recall that one at all, but it's
I
this
do. I'd have to watch it
filmmaker.
again.
Yeah, yeah, it's this filmmaker who's like basically feeding his skin into a movie projector.
Hmm.
And I think that more than anything, what he's trying to speak to with these movies, like on that level, is kind of like like we've already talked about it being critical of his film industry and all this stuff, but I think a big part of it is just this idea of like giving everything to the art form. And I think that obviously this movie was a labor of love. It would not exist if not for that, because it's the most uncommercial film I could possibly imagine in my entire life. So
Aside from
clearly,
aside from castration movie, which is doing very
I
well for
no,
that.
I think I no, if anything, castration movie is. castration maybe on paper does a lot of things that shouldn't work, but it is not, there's not on a content basis,
Yeah,
there's
no,
nothing
not
in
at
it that
all.
goes extreme, like this does, like it's totally different. Yes, I mean it's too long, but I mean the
And it's
runtime's
shot
the
on
only
video.
scary thing really, and I think yeah, and shot on video. But maybe I should shoot the next one on the red, like the old red. I get one of
Nice.
those kicking
That'd be
around.
sick.
That would look so funny. But sorry, what I was gonna say is like I do think that Surgeon and Alex like definitely do have like sort of like feelings about the film industry. Like just to glean it from their work, I think that they feel a certain level by which they felt from this movie you can tell that they feel like there's some corrupting force of like working in film where it's like you have to sell yourself out. You're
Hmm.
always like kind of held at a point where you could be castrated at any minute, like and I think that like their work like looking at the ABCs of Death segment and Alex's most recent film, I think there's a level by which they feel like they kind of must have put everything into this and kind of got robbed or something. Like there was something that was really taken from them by like both the reception of this film and the sort of like ways in which like the medium yeah, I don't know. I think this actually like just to expand it out, I think this goes for basically all filmmakers, which is that making movies is kind of the worst thing you can ever want to do with your life. And I've got to say like I'll give Serbian film this. Sometimes it do feel like that.
Yeah. I there's a reason that I haven't pursued that as my main career.
Yeah,
And
no. Sometimes it really do feel like that.
I I respect you and other people so much, but I do think it's a compulsion more than anything. It's you can't think of doing anything else. And I at one
Yeah.
stage,
I joke of it that's a curse, It's like I'm cursed to do this. Like I have no other choice.
it's funny that we were talking about how dated the red looks because appropriately it looks like porn. Like a lot of
Yeah.
porn came to look like this.
Yeah, no, it is like really cool because 2010 it's like kind of marginal, right? Whether or not stuff's gonna be shot on film or not. And like I think the fact that this was able to be shot on like I mean I'm just guessing that's early red. That's what it looks like
No,
to
no, it
me in
is
terms
right.
of the coloring. It is okay, perfect. Yeah, I mean I shot on that same fucking camera so many times it's like burned into my skull what it looks like. Um fucked into my skull, I guess I should say. But the thing about it is like this is a movie that can only exist and have the reputation as with the advent of like digital filmmaking around the world, making stories like this more accessible to be told with less money. I don't know what the full budget was of this movie, but like it does have like a very small list of characters and locations. It's shot digitally, like it's an achievable thing to do, like they're able to make it happen. And I think there is something about what you said about like its age to look closer to the pornography which it's about.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting, especially because if in the movie all the pornography is shot on like crappy handy cams and shit. Like I think all
Yeah.
the porn's being shot on like HDV tape and
Yeah, yeah.
stuff.
It's a very artistic, weird porn film, but also they are shooting on what does look like camcorders.
Yeah.
I think one of the grossest things about the porn scenes in it is just how Milos is just like making out with these women in a way where he is just like eating the face off them with his tongue going everywhere. It's so grim.
It does make me curious, like what does Serbian porn look like? Like I've never tried to look at this. I'm
Not
sure
one of
it's
not one of your fave
yeah.
categories.
What?
Not one of your fave categories.
No, I've never typed in Serbian into like a porn search bar. And you know what? This movie does not make me want to do that by any
No
stretch.
fair. Do you remember around the time of this that just how people working in film or students would talk about the red? where it would just be like, oh, it's what David Fincher shot The Social Network on. A friend of mine did a short film that's called Shot on Red, where it's somebody just going, oh, did you make your short? And they're like, oh, what's it about? And he's like, oh, yeah, we shot it on the red. He just keeps bringing everything back to shooting it on red.
That's really funny. I mean, like I shot every film I did between Computer Hearts and Castration movie was shot on red. But like the funny thing was like I was like when I was a cinematographer, my whole goal was to find ways to shoot on red where I could hide the fact that we shot on red, like so it wouldn't look like we shot on red. So it'd
Yeah.
be like I would use like old vintage Soviet lenses and
Oh, sick.
like also like do some post processing on the video to like try I would always try to push it to look a little bit more like film and like cut down the like cleanness of
Yeah.
it. So like if you look at like some of those old films I did, like fucking like we did one called Hack's Dead Room that we like
Yeah, I've
put
watched it.
the we
Yeah.
yeah, we shot that on red and then I like post
You,
dubbed it onto like VHS tape.
yeah, you said that film didn't really
Yeah.
work until it was post-dubbed onto VHS. It was like,
Yeah, because the red's just too clean, and so that was always my thing was trying to find ways to kind of like fuck with the image a little bit and like make
yeah.
it so that we like using like what's called like a pro mist filter and stuff, so you could get the lighting to like kind of bounce in a way that was or like bloom in a way that like felt a little closer to film stock. So it was always like playing around in those sorts of fashions. And yeah, I mean. I think that that's like one of the things that's so interesting about Serbian film is it is like it does feel like that fucking like raw. You get the red footage off the camera, you throw it into Rec 709, and now you've got like some high contrast, gross looking, like ugly, somewhat red tinted footage. And that's not to say that the red is like an inherently ugly camera or anything. It's just like it has such a specific look when you get that contrast on it. And
Absolutely.
which this isn't the red shot on red podcast, so I'll leave it at that. But I will say it is really fascinating to me how this is the only sort of like extreme horror movie from that time that really has like that style of look to it that like kind
Yeah.
of jumps off the mind. Like nothing else really broke through. Like when I worked on Ryan Nicholson's movie Caller, which would have been like 3 years after this one, the in like 2013 December we shot that. Like we were shooting that by that point it was like the Black Magic cinema
Yeah.
cameras were like the new like really cheap one that you could shoot on, which kind of had like it was designed really to push color grading software. So it was like, a much flatter image you would get off. It's not that same degree of like high contrast that the red will feed you. Yeah, or I guess sharpness is the word I'm looking for, that high degree of sharpness that the red gives you. So like, I don't know, it's just interesting. I can't think of any other like extreme movies
No.
from this period. And as a matter of fact, I think in terms of like I really do think that Serbian film might be the last of its kind in terms of like extreme horror that gets like dubbed that like most disturbing movie. Like it
Yeah.
might have just like won. It might have just been
I
like, okay,
may
no one
have,
needs to no
yeah.
one needs to push past this one. We did it. We hit the limit. Because I can't think of anything that's stuck in the public consciousness since 2010.
I mean
I really
the
can't think of anything.
the Terrifier films maybe when Terrifier 2 came out and there was the stories of like the faintings and pukings in the cinema. Maybe.
Yeah, but like no one's looking at Terrifier as like that's the most disturbing movie ever made. Like I'm
Yeah.
not seeing that. Like definitely people look at those and say they're extremely gory and like it's a return to like a gore porn sensibility. But
Yeah.
I really can't think of anything that has the same degree of like vitriolic, this is like the most disturbing, gross, banned in 30 countries sort of fucking reputation. I think that Serbian film was kind of like the last of its kind, where it could be a movie that has a sort of content, can get a more traditional attempt at a release, can get banned by ratings boards in certain countries. Like because of where we're at with the internet now, it's like that stuff just doesn't happen
Yeah,
anymore, you
yeah.
know?
It was
Like
the last gasp of that. Because
yeah, it kind of is the last time, you
there was
know?
a few movies that were kind of like banned in close proximity to each other by the British Board of Censors. There was the uncut version of A Serbian Film. There was Human Centipede 2. there was The Bunny Game and Hate Crime. And
Yeah,
I think when they were all banned, it just showed like there was articles being written where people were like, it's not really effective considering that I can like download it in like 3 clicks. Like it was the
yeah.
last attempt to like maybe the last attempt to like hold the flood back and like film censors realizing they couldn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's actually those films you pointed out, I think with the exception of Hate Crime, which I think never really broke beyond like
No, only
Hate Crime's
sickos knew about that
interesting.
being banned.
Yeah, because like I was like I saw like I think Unearthed Films put it out here. So like I was I remember the director was also kind of a fucking I shouldn't speak ill of people. He let's just say I didn't fully agree with his reasoning behind making that movie when he tried to defend it getting banned.
Yeah.
But like I think it's so cool because like you know, out of these filmmakers, like I'll say like that trifecta of movies that got banned are so interesting because you have Bunny Game, Human Centipede, 2 specifically, and Serbian Film. And I think it's really interesting how with both Human Centipede 2 and Serbian Film, they ended up kind of having to get released in like these compromised ways where like Human Centipede 2 was in black and white to get through
I
censorship
didn't know that.
and
I thought it was a stylistic choice.
no, because they released the color version years later. Like it was shot in color.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so I mean, it's possible that Tom Six just like put it into black and white because he's like, oh, this is the more artistic one. But like, I think it's so funny because like with that movie, the color version came out years later. Serbian Film, I think, only got released stateside uncut in the last year
Yeah, by
by
American.
Unearthed Film. But like with Bunny Game, I think it's so funny because Adam Reamer, like he's like a much more respected director, right? Like he's like doing like big independent movies now. He's like a Sundance guy,
Yeah.
and his movies blow up on TikTok, and he's doing great. And I think that's like super cool that like one of those guys got out of that, and I think the reason for that is the fact that Bunny Game is out of those films the most artistically viable.
I
And
haven't seen it
also I
yet.
think, and on top of that, was mostly only known as like a weird avant-garde like movie online. It didn't end up on like the most disturbing movies list or like didn't
No.
get talked about in the same way as both Human Centipedes or Serbian Film. And I think that that's like really interesting how one of these filmmakers was able to pivot eventually.
I mean,
Um,
no more than
yeah.
yourself, Louise.
Yeah, no, it's true. I guess I did the same thing.
I
I
mean,
guess it,
maybe looking at your bank balance and like feeling like you're cursed to make movies, you might not feel like that, but you did. Like you're being interviewed by The Guardian.
yeah, that's true. I mean, like going from making computer hearts with all my like underground film buddies to you know, yeah, being in Sight and Sound or whatever is a pretty hilarious pathway. You know, being the be sitting under a glass table while shooting collar and holding a light for like a penetration scene. Uh, as my first job to like being interviewed for Sight and Sound feels pretty hilarious when you think about it. Um, but yeah, I mean,
Awesome.
I think that what I am most curious about is whether or not movies like Serbian Film, like whether or not there's a place for them now. Like if you were to try to make something like this today. Um, because like I've been thinking about this a lot recently when I've talked about the relationship between um how castration movie deals with horror, where like in castration movie we obviously like 2 especially has these like horror sequences, but we don't do any violence or gore in them.
Yeah.
Like it's a different kind of violence. Like it's definitely like very sexual violence in certain scenes, but like it's not you know, it's not relying on gory effects and like all this sort of like extremity that you'd see from like these, I guess, like this last breath of 2010s
Yeah.
um shock movies. And I guess that to me it really comes down to the fact that like because of the prevalence online of us seeing so much violence and death and genocide and destruction from all the wars going on in the world and all these horrible like war crimes and stuff, it just feels like less valid to be like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna go make a Serbian film, you know? Like it doesn't feel like you can speak to what you're already seeing.
Yeah.
You know, in a way where like when these movies came out, we were just post like the height of the Iraq War in like North America. So I think people were kind of primed to see something that could like add an artistic lens to like the horrors that
Mm.
like were kind of only implied through the stories we were hearing, and like the videos were kind of more abstract back then. It wasn't like social media where you're seeing like on the ground uh like cell phone footage of like someone having a
Yeah,
bomb
yeah.
hit them, you know. So it's like I do really wonder uh what the modern shock film could even be. Like with Castration movie, I was like, oh, I'm gonna try to do it through like language, because of the fact that like what horrifies me more than anything in the world right now is the fact that you can see a horrible video of like the genocides or wars going on in the world, and then or like just real life violence online, and then you see people talk like discoursing about it, where people are like, oh well, that's not so bad, or that's fake, or whatever. Like people get into arguments about like what they're looking at, and to me that's the really horrifying
Yeah.
thing. So that was what I kind of like tried to feed into Castration movie. Is the way people talk to each other is like what I find scary today. But if you were to try to go out of your way and make like a movie in line with like Human Centipede 2, Bunny Game, Serbian Film,
I mean,
any
I
of these sorts
might.
of things brought up, what like would it work today? Would anyone care? Like would it stick out? Like how do you do it? Like it feels almost like we were talking about kind of like the horror YouTube influencer type people, like the people who talk about you know no one has to actually watch the movies. We need someone to talk about and describe what happens in the movies, right? Um, I guess that you'd just be trying to like fill it with more fucked up stuff than you'd see in these other films. But I'm just wondering if like what even counts as fucked up anymore, I guess. Can anyone duplicate the success now of something like Serbian Film? Like could anyone make a new movie that would enter the zeitgeist in a similar way?
I think it's very well said, and I think it's interesting because it just made me immediately think of Abby Thorne on Kill James Bond podcast. They were talking about like the death of the kind of like YouTuber video essay format of like BreadTube, if you want to call it that. But
Hmm.
they were talking about how some people have kind of said that like the video essay as a concern was an Obama era concern. And it's such a Western perspective where things seemed relatively well from a very Western centric perspective. But nonetheless, that during the Obama era, people were more interested in watching stuff that went, hey, this thing that we take for granted is kind of fucked up. Whereas now we're so besieged by this shit all the time. Nobody wants to fucking do that. Nobody wants to think, really, really look for how stuff is fucked up anymore. And I think that's a similar kind of thing to what you just described.
Yeah, no, it's like it's easy to see how fucked up everything is, and I guess that's I guess that's the thing for us artists to really think about, and us culture critics to think about is what do we do now? How do
Yeah.
we keep making art?
It's like that joke about a comedian had about like the Babadook was probably not a box office hit in any countries where there was war currently happening. Like nobody needs to terrify themselves when reality. But then again, that's also times when horror that can be the moment for horror, and that can be the moment for when a new wave of horror breaks. I will say that I do think there is an appetite for that kind of content based on the fact that more than one director that I've spoke to, both Fred and Jorg, when they meet fans or interact with fans online, they are getting tons of interaction from young women. And I think that is like that's come up enough recently. And I know that like you mentioned on Trans Panic, like a load of people showing up to a screening of 964 Pinocchio because like they'd heard about it on TikTok. Like I do think amongst generation whatever, Zoomers, whatever, there is more of an appetite for that kind of content than people think, and the demographic is changing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, thing is, I think that demographic always existed. It's just like the spaces by which people could go out were so dominated by a particular type of what I'll call like a horror t-shirt bro.
Yeah.
And I think that now it's starting to change a little bit more, and I think that that's really nice. I think it's being opened up the way in which community can build around this stuff. Yeah, I think that there's more to more that can happen in the upcoming sort of circuit for fucked up movies. It's just gonna take a really interesting artist to make anyone pay attention. Like it's gonna have to really hit hard in like a cool, interesting way, and we'll have to think about, look at the history of how these films have been approached and try to do something in a completely different way. Like, how can we, what hasn't been done before and what feels like contemporary. Like the thing that's not going to work is someone being like, "Oh, what if snuff film but internet influencer?" Like I think we've had enough movies about like well, what if everyone was tuning into a red room sort of thing? Like that was already a big thing in the 2000s. And
Even
so
even
I
in like
think,
the
yeah.
webcam stream became a thing, even in like Halloween Resurrection and stuff as well. Like,
Yes. So it's like, how do you move past that? What's the next step in that journey? We don't need the live stream stuff, snuff film movie. We need something that pushes it into something new and exciting and tackles the themes of like what it's like to live in a era where that stuff does exist. Like, I'm just so fascinated by the fact that it's like, yeah, like all these things that were kind of the boogeyman of like this era, like that we're talking about today. Like now I could like go hop on like a kick stream and like watch someone being like goaded into suicide or like
yeah, yeah,
like beating up their friends, like that in a way is pretty close to me to like what snuff, like what I
yeah,
think of as
yeah,
snuff content, like making money by like humiliating and torturing yourself. It's kind of like what Serbian film is about, and we
yeah.
just live. I did say this to Alex when we met. You know what's so fucked up, Alex, is you wrote Serbian film 15, 16 years ago, and now it just does feel like we're living in that fucking world. And boy does it
Yeah,
sometimes. So yeah,
yeah, for 100%.
I think that's my final statement on Serbian film.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on, Louise. In terms of stuff that you've got to plug, I mean, this is coming out probably going to drop at the beginning of March, so I can like pace myself. But there's going to be more crowdfunding for part 3 and 4 of Castration Movie, isn't there?
Yeah, so if this is coming out start of March, I mean everyone probably will be in the midst of our next crowdfunding campaign, presumably. So anyone listening to this, please like go to castrationmovie.com and throw a couple bucks our way. I will say the next castration movie has a scene in it where I was very stupidly, I was on a really empty flight recently, so I had like a whole like row to myself, and I was kind of secretly trying to edit one section of this movie. I was kind of like just skimming through, making sure that I could do this export while I was on my flight. And someone who was a few rows behind me was like sneaking a peek at my computer screen from across the plane. And when he saw what I was working on, like what was on my screen for just a split second, he got so mad he started yelling at me. So I will say, if you like weird, disturbing stuff, that's definitely where the next movie is going.
Hell yeah.
It is so if you like if if you're listening to this podcast, definitely you might want to hop on that, get a ticket to the digital premiere in our Discord server or whatever. Other than that, the first chapter of that movie will be premiering at BFI Flair at the end of the month here. So,
Oh
uh,
shit.
yeah. So, if you're in London, come buy a ticket.
It's funny you mentioned like horror t-shirt, bro, because it's like I do have like a long sleeve August Underground shirt, and it's like I think like that's the real reason to transition is so that I can just narrowly avoid being a
Well,
horror.
no, I did the exact same thing. Like I transitioned, so it was okay for me to wear the horror t-shirts because then it's like cute and quirky. I have a full bin in my closet that is just like I think 100 horror movie t-shirts that I had collected over the years. It's like every horror movie you can think of, I have a t-shirt for. I guess that's everything for me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Louise. It was a great episode as ever. Thank you.